Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're framing this analysis as a special briefing specifically for you, the modern policymaker. We're not just, dusting off an old history book here. We are dissecting an absolute masterclass in statecraft. We're going to look at exactly how historical leverage can be translated into modern, actionable strategies to protect the most vulnerable people in our societies. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. How do you secure minority rights during a total regime change? Really think about the immense gravity of that question for a second. When a massive transfer of power happens, when the old rules are just completely thrown out the window and a brand new nation is being born, marginalized groups face an absolute existential threat. Without the right safeguards, minority voices can literally just be erased in the chaotic rush toward a new government. So to understand how to navigate a minefield like this, we're looking at one of the most brilliant political strategists of the 20th century, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, during the incredibly tense, high-stakes days of decolonization in India.
Just to set the stage, consider this staggering number, 7,371. That is the massive number of published pages Dr. Ambedkar had already written by the year 1946. We're talking about a monumental intellectual foundation spanning 10 whole volumes of writings and speeches. Think about that. This wasn't just some politician speaking off the cuff. Every single argument he made was deeply rooted in meticulous historical research and legal theory. Understanding the sheer weight of his scholarship is absolutely crucial before we analyze a single critical letter he wrote in 1946. It proves that his strategies weren't accidents. They were born from incredibly rigorous, calculated analysis.
All right, moving into Section 1, the 1946 regime change and the imminent transfer of power. To really appreciate Ambedkar's strategy, we've got to understand the environment he was operating in. Picture this. It's post-World War II India. The British Empire is exhausted, they're practically broke, and they are actively preparing to exit the stage through what was called the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946. Now, this was a British proposal explicitly designed to discuss and negotiate the transfer of power directly to Indian leadership. But Ambedkar recognized a massive, glaring danger embedded in this plan. If the British just, packed up their bags and handed the keys over, they'd effectively be handing absolute power to the Indian National Congress. And Ambedkar viewed the Congress as being heavily dominated by upper castes. Under this exit plan, the scheduled castes, the historically marginalized Untouchables, would be left dangerously vulnerable without any institutional shields whatsoever. And this brings us to a fundamental clash of political visions. On one side of the aisle, you had the Congress Party, led by huge figures like Gandhi and Nehru, and they were demanding unfettered independence. Their main goal was just the immediate removal of the British. They argued that, hey, Indians will sort out their own internal social issues once they're actually sovereign. But on the other side, you had Ambedkar's core demand, independence tied to minority protections. So the crucial point here is that this wasn't just a simple disagreement over timing. It was a profound strategic challenge for policymakers. Ambedkar argued that decolonization without constitutional safeguards wasn't actually freedom for the marginalized at all. It was simply a transfer of oppression from British elites over to Indian elites.
Which leads us right into Section 2, the political leverage, and calling in the historical debt.
So think about this practically. When you represent a marginalized group that doesn't have military might or immense wealth, how do you force the hand of a massive empire? Well, mere moral pleading is just going to be ignored, right? Instead, Ambedkar essentially audited history itself, and mapping this out reveals a fascinating, really brilliant trajectory. He pointed all the way back to 1757, to the Battle of Plassey, where Robert Clive secured British dominance in India. Ambedkar asked who actually fought in Clive's army. He noted it was heavily composed of sepoy troops from the lower castes. Then, moving to the 1770s and 80s, during the Warren Hastings era, early British governors-general heavily used untouchable recruits to suppress rebellions. Because these groups were already marginalized by Indian rulers, they served as incredibly loyal auxiliaries to the British. But then, fast forward to the 1890s, and the British hypocritically instituted a total ban on untouchable recruitment just to appease the upper castes. Ambedkar mapped this entire timeline perfectly to show that the British Empire was literally built on the backs of the very people they were now preparing to just abandon.
He distilled this leverage into a devastatingly clear argument. I want you to really hear the audacity in this quote. He said, "The British have a moral responsibility. British rule in India owes its very existence to the help rendered by the Untouchables." Notice what he's doing here. He is definitely not glorifying colonialism. He's weaponizing it. He's basically looking the British Empire squarely in the eye and saying, "You did not conquer this land alone. We helped you. And because of that help, you owe us a massive debt. You cannot simply walk away and leave us to face the consequences of a system you helped manipulate.
And this wasn't just some philosophical musing in an essay somewhere. No, this was a targeted tactical strike. This exact argument was laid out in a letter dated May 14, 1946, sent directly to A.V. Alexander. Now, Alexander was a key member of the British cabinet mission and a Labour Party minister. Ambedkar chose his audience absolutely perfectly here. He was speaking to a British minister who represented a progressive Labour government, and he used their own imperial history to force the Crown's hand at the absolute most critical moment of these decolonization negotiations.
Let's move to Section 3, Policy Demands and Safeguards, where we'll see exactly how he went about translating leverage to law.
Because, let's be real, leverage is pretty useless if it just lingers as a historical grievance, right? It has to become law. Ambedkar took that historical debt and translated it into a precise, modern, actionable policy framework. Just look at these safeguard demands. First, reserved legislative seats for minorities, to absolutely guarantee political representation. Second, a minority veto power on any caste-based laws. This was to ensure the majority couldn't just legally oppress them. And third, explicit constitutional protections against Hindu majority reprisals. He basically told the British, look, you cannot sign off on this transfer of power unless these specific, tangible safeguards are hardwired right into the new nation's architecture.
Now, history is always complex, and as you might expect, this strategy definitely had its critics. Ambedkar faced accusations from some of his contemporaries of being, quote-unquote, pro-British, mostly because he was willing to sit down and negotiate with the colonizers while others were just demanding their immediate exit. But as our sources clearly explain, this was pure realpolitik in action. It was a calculated, incredibly pragmatic risk. For Ambedkar, it was never, ever about loyalty to the British Crown. It was entirely about securing justice and, quite frankly, survival for the Dalits. He was more than willing to endure political unpopularity if it meant his people wouldn't just be completely erased in the new republic.
So what does this all mean for us today? That brings us to Section 4, Lessons for Modern Policymakers, and the realpolitik of rights. Securing minority rights in times of a volatile political transition takes way more than just relying on the goodwill of the majority. It requires audacious leverage, a totally unromantic view of history, and just razor-sharp strategy. If we extract Ambedkar's blueprint from 1946, it actually gives modern policymakers a really clear, structured framework. Step 1. Identify the exact vulnerability during a transition of power. You have to ask, who gets left behind when the dust settles? Step 2. Uncover historical or political leverage. Do an audit of the system. Who owes whom? What hidden debts exist in the institutional history? And finally, Step 3. Don't just ask for apologies. Tie that leverage directly to unbreakable constitutional safeguards. You have to turn the moral debt into hard, enforceable law.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on for your own policy work. In today's global political transitions, whether we're talking about a shifting democracy, a post-conflict nation, or just a major institutional overhaul, what leverage ensures that minority voices are not completely erased? Dr. Ambedkar proved that history can absolutely be a weapon for justice, but only if you know exactly how to wield it. Thanks so much for joining this briefing. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and let these historic lessons shape how you view policy today.